Just to level set everybody. So this Kaggle group started about, I don't know, maybe even late last year, I think. And at the time when it was started, we had a discussion about which particular competition that we should collectively participate in or enter. And after a brief discussion, we picked a few. The idea was to pick something that was not ongoing, that had just completed. And there were two reasons behind it. One was the fact that if it's completed, then you can kind of have teams of more than what the limit is. Otherwise, data sharing about the competition or sharing data or sharing information beyond the team is not permitted by Kaggle rules. So we wanted to be kind of compliant with that, and that's why we chose to join or at least participate in a competition that had completed. Secondly, completed competitions have a lot more posts, a lot more data openly shared and methods and stuff. And since the goal of this group is to learn to participate in Kaggle, not yet maybe some of the participants can still win competitions, but the goal was to learn. Therefore it was deemed more important that we be able to share data and try things individually as well as a group. So those were the two reasons we decided to at least investigate a competition that had completed. We started one competition. I forget, maybe Mehul can remember the name, but what we quickly discovered was due to some issues with Kaggle system itself, we couldn't really get quick results on that competition. And then Mehul suggested that we change and to the one that we have been discussing for the last several weeks, which is the Human Protein Atlas competition. And if you go back and listen to much of the recordings, I think except last week when we didn't have a meeting, you'll get a good idea of the progress that several people, Mehul, there was another person by name Akshay who used to join as well, and Steve Roberts, who also has presented multiple times in the meeting. They all had made very good progress to where they were getting results at least comparable within computing constraints to what some of the other participants in the competition had gotten. This is the Human Protein Atlas, so it was to identify the proteins in certain images and get the best score, and the results were published in the Nature paper and so on. After a lot of discussion, I think, and we'll also hear Mehul talk about what he was able to do in the last week shortly. But after a lot of discussion, I think most of us were hitting a wall with respect to how much progress we could make without massive amounts of compute being available. So I think we are at the point now where I believe we should be putting out a call for all of you to submit what kind of new competition we should participate in. And again, given the history and the learning that we have had, I would continue to probably wish that we choose a competition that is recently completed. And this time, based on the learning, probably something that is that can be reasonably excised, or people can make good progress without massive amounts of compute having to be necessary. So at the end of the meeting, I'll come back and talk about maybe also Mehul and I can put out a call on the Kaggle group to suggest competitions that we can explore on Kaggle. Anyways, with that preamble, Mehul, take it away on what you were able to do, and I'll just say a few words of where or what I was able to do after you're done.
No, yeah, last week I didn't have much progress. Like I'm also running against compute limits. It's like even though I have access to a GPU, it's like if I run 30-40 epochs it's around that same number, like 0.4748, kind
Yeah.
of like stuck. Yeah. Without that external data set, it's really hard to make
Get
progress.
you. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I, go ahead.
I was thinking the same thing. Like we can find another competition which completed recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in fact, it was also getting even more annoying because I was close, like you said, to about 0.4243 in my very first run
Hmm.
and the competition. And then I tried a whole bunch of things using oversampling, using augmentation, using different losses, the more accurate F1 score. Besides that, all of these different things, and without more compute cycles and Kaggle, the one thing I learned in this by doing the competition is all the limitations on compute.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah,
Because you definitely bump into those. One is the data limitation, as a result of which I had to go, switch from Colab to using Kaggle itself, because
yeah,
Colab simply wouldn't support unzipping gigabytes of files. Then Kaggle itself, I found out, really frustratingly has a 9-hour limit on interactive computing. So
right,
even though I'm sitting and kind of monitoring it every hour, and it logs you out after 9 hours. So if you run, so when your epochs take 20 minutes to run, that's very frustrating because 30, 40 epochs basically means you've exhausted your computing and you're just about at the 0.4 something level of result when that happens.
right,
So
yeah,
that's another frustrating thing. And the third thing I learned was, if you literally have to sit or have some kind of interactive thing on Kaggle, because if it doesn't see more any interaction for more than an hour, it just resets the dang kernel or stuff that it's running. And
right,
that's even more frustrating if you're submitting epoch and it takes, you're doing 5 epochs and each epoch is 20 minutes. That's longer than an hour.
right.
And you have to be there and do something in order for it not to log you, not to reset the
Hmm.
kernel. So it's just kind of very frustrating because you can't make much progress.
Right,
But it does teach you what Jeremy emphasizes, which is, I think in this case, unfortunately, you can't make much progress, but you really need small test cases or sample test cases or something to tune your algorithm and stuff. Or working on these large test cases, which take hours to do 3 or 4 epochs, is
hmm,
definitely not the way to make progress.
right. Yeah. Mhm. No, I agree. Yeah, we can use all of this to pick our next competition. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think
I-
that's the definite
yeah,
benefit, is you're much more comfortable with
yeah.
the stuff. So I agree. And what I was thinking, maybe you can even post some call for the next suggestion for competition and say, hey, we would like it. I think we'd still like to stick to Kaggle, because sometimes, making it to esoteric, some other competition, then a lot of other issues come into play. But recently ended, probably sticking to Vision for one more round before we move on to natural language or other things.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Hmm.
and something that, as you did, maybe you can even propose that, hey, run a few cycles on some existing kernels or kernels that people have posted, to make sure that the results come back as you did last time,
Okay.
to point
Hmm.
us in the right direction. So maybe a few pointers along that line. If you start a thread on Kaggle, then I'll chime in as well and say, and that can invite new people who are joining in as well to and say, hey, we participate in the discussion. This is your chance to influence which of the competitions we will do over the next several weeks, and
Right.
that'll um,
Yep.
enable a lot of people to join in as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Yeah, like some image based, and we should do a trial run to make sure, we get results back. Yeah.
Right. And something that has ended recently, because that, as we learned, allows us to
Yeah.
not worry about,
I-
sharing data and ideas and
yeah.
those kind of things.
Yeah, I think there's one good one that ended, like it was the Bengali script, and I think the
Right.
images are small, but yeah, like we should just try a few kernels, and I'm pretty sure the images should be small. So, and I
Yeah,
think it
the
was
images are small. It is fairly complicated
yeah,
stuff because of I think there was, I was also following along on Fast AI version 2.
hmm
A guy was, a person by name Mueller was doing some notebooks and lecturing, and
okay,
he shared, how you could, because it's also a multiple um, data set
okay,
thingy. So yeah, that could be one of the potential candidates. Although, did it end already, or is it still
yeah,
ongoing?
it's ended, yeah,
Oh, okay, okay,
yeah,
yeah,
but yeah, we can look, yeah, we can. I'll put out the call and we can look some more, yeah,
okay,
yep.
yeah. There's also, I think, the whale something
Yeah,
related one.
yeah,
Again,
okay,
don't know how big the data set is and all that
hmm
kind of stuff. I think even the Bengali one, I vaguely recall, was fairly large, but
I see.
those are a couple of good ideas. So yeah, I think, and to all of you who have joined, Alvaro, Victor, and Yuri, please feel free to chime in with what potential competitions that we could start, given that I think we are at an end here with the human protein. Pretty
hmm
much everybody who's been trying it has reached the limit of their
Right.
compute capabilities and other limiting events or limiting constraints, and are not making much progress. So it's time to move on and learn from other competitions.
Yep. It sounds good.
Okay, anything
Okay.
else, anyone? If not, thanks for joining. We'll get done quickly. I think you can go back and listen, except for last week. I think the previous 5 to 6 weeks should give you a good idea of what progress Steve, Akshay, Mehul, these were the main people who contributed a lot to the progress, and what learning was there from the competition. So I'd encourage you guys to go and listen to that, and also learn from the various notebooks that people had shared, and they're in their GitHub repositories. And Mehul will put out a call, and I'll chime in as well for the new competition. So all of your ideas on what you think are good things from competition point of view are most welcome.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, thanks.